The woman's fist connected with the weathered door of the ranch house, just as the sun began its descent behind the Nevada mountains, painting the sky in shades of burnt orange and deep crimson that matched the dust coating her worn traveling dress. Warren Tucker was halfway through shoeing his mare when he heard the knock, an unusual sound this far from Piotch proper. His ranch sat a good 8 miles outside the Nevada mining town, and unexpected visitors were about as common as rain in August. He set down his tools and wiped his hands on his leather work apron, squinting toward the house through the golden light of early evening. The year was 1872, and in all his 26 years, most of them spent on this land his father had claimed before the silver boom, Warren had learned that strangers at your door usually meant one of 3 things: trouble, more trouble, or someone so lost they might as well be dead. He approached cautiously, his boots crunching on the dry earth. When he rounded the corner of his modest 2-story home, he found a woman standing on his porch, her hand raised to knock again. She was young, probably early 20s, with dark hair escaping from a bun that had likely been neat when the day started. Her dress, once a respectable blue calico, was covered in trail dust, and her face showed the kind of exhaustion that came from too many days in the saddle. "Can I help you, miss?" Warren called out, staying a respectful distance back. The woman turned, and despite her obvious fatigue, her green eyes were sharp and alert. "I hope so. I am looking for the Morrison Ranch. I was told in town it was west of Piotch, but I have been riding for 3 hours, and I think I have gone the wrong direction entirely." Warren removed his hat, running a hand through his brown hair. "Morrison Ranch is east of town, not west, about 12 miles out on the other side. Whoever gave you directions either does not know the area or was having fun at your expense." Her shoulders sagged visibly, and for a moment Warren thought she might cry. Instead, she straightened her spine and nodded. "Thank you. I will head back then. Miss, the sun is going down. You will be riding in full dark within the hour, and there are ravines and drop-offs between here and town that are dangerous even in daylight, not to mention the occasional mountain lion." He hesitated, knowing how this might sound but unable to let her ride off to probable injury or death. "I have a barn with a clean stall if you need a place for your horse, and my house has a spare room. You are welcome to stay the night and head out at first light." She studied him for a long moment, clearly weighing the risk of accepting hospitality from a strange man against the dangers of night travel. "I do not want to impose. It is not an imposition. Out here we help each other. It is how people survive." Warren stepped closer, keeping his movements slow and non-threatening. "I am Warren Tucker. This is my land, has been my family's land since before the silver rush brought everyone flooding into these parts." "Eliza Ashford," she replied, and there was something in the way she said her name, a slight hesitation that made Warren wonder if there was more to her story. "I accept your offer, Mr. Tucker. Thank you for your kindness." Warren led her around to where her horse, a tired-looking bay gelding, stood with his head hanging low. The animal needed water and rest as much as his rider did. Warren helped Eliza down from the saddle, noting that she winced when her feet hit the ground. "How long have you been traveling?" he asked as he led the bay toward the barn. 2 weeks, Eliza answered, following behind. "From San Francisco. Well, originally from Boston, but San Francisco is where I started this particular journey." Warren glanced back at her. A woman traveling alone from San Francisco was unusual enough, but from Boston originally. That spoke of education, probably money or at least comfortable circumstances. Yet here she was, alone on the trail, looking for a ranch in Nevada. The story did not quite add up, but he had learned long ago that people's business was their own unless they chose to share it. The barn was well kept, with 4 stalls and a small tack room. Warren's mare, the one he had been shoeing, occupied one stall, and he led Eliza's gelding into another. While he unsaddled the horse and began brushing him down, Eliza leaned against the stall door, watching. "You are good with horses," she observed. "Grew up with them." "My father used to say that a man who could not care for his animals properly had no business calling himself a rancher." Warren worked the brush in steady strokes, feeling the tension ease from the gelding's muscles. "Your horse has been worked hard. He will need at least a day of rest before you push him again." "I do not have a day," Eliza said quietly. "I need to reach the Morrison Ranch as soon as possible." Warren paused in his brushing. "Is someone expecting you? Are you in some kind of trouble?" "No trouble. At least, not the kind you are thinking." She sighed, and the sound carried the weight of the world. "Thomas Morrison is my uncle, my mother's brother. I wrote to him months ago asking if I could come stay with him, and he agreed. I have the letter in my bag. Then one more day will not make much difference, and your horse arriving lame or dead will not help anyone." Warren finished with the gelding and filled the water bucket from the pump. The horse drank deeply, and Warren made a mental note to check on him later to ensure he did not founder from drinking too much too fast. When they walked back to the house, the sun had nearly disappeared, leaving only a purple glow on the horizon. Warren lit the lamps in the kitchen, the warm light pushing back the gathering darkness. The house was clean but clearly the domain of a man living alone. Practical furniture, no decorative touches, everything in its place because that was efficient, not because it was pleasing to the eye. "I was about to make supper when you knocked," Warren said, moving to the cast-iron stove. "Nothing fancy, just beans and salt pork with cornbread, but you are welcome to share it." "That sounds wonderful," Eliza said, and the genuine gratitude in her voice made Warren realize she was probably hungry enough that anything would sound good. "There is a pump out back if you want to wash up. Clean towels in the cupboard next to it." Warren began building up the fire in the stove while Eliza disappeared through the back door. While he prepared the meal, Warren found himself thinking about his unexpected guest. Eliza Ashford carried herself with the bearing of someone educated, someone from a different world than this rough Nevada territory. Her hands, though dusty from travel, were not the work-worn hands of a ranch woman. She spoke well, with the careful diction of someone who had been taught proper grammar and elocution. Yet here she was, alone on the frontier, traveling to stay with an uncle she apparently had to write to for permission to visit. The story had the shape of heartbreak or scandal, though Warren could not guess which. Not that it mattered. His job was to offer shelter for the night and directions in the morning, nothing more. Eliza returned looking somewhat refreshed, though the exhaustion still showed in the shadows under her eyes. She had attempted to fix her hair, though wisps still escaped around her face. Warren found himself noticing that she was pretty, in a delicate sort of way that seemed out of place in this harsh landscape. "Can I help with anything?" she asked. "You can set the table. Plates are in that cupboard, utensils in the drawer below." Warren stirred the beans, adding a bit more water. The salt pork sizzled in another pan, and the cornbread was already baking, filling the kitchen with its warm, yeasty smell. They worked in companionable silence, and Warren appreciated that Eliza did not feel the need to fill every moment with chatter. Some people were uncomfortable with quiet, but she moved around his kitchen with calm efficiency, finding what was needed without fuss. When they sat down to eat, Warren said a brief grace, more from habit than deep religiosity, and they began their meal. For several minutes, the only sounds were the clink of utensils on plates and the crackling of the fire in the stove. "This is very good," Eliza said finally. "Better than anything I managed to cook over a campfire these past weeks." "You were camping." Warren could not keep the surprise from his voice. "Alone." "I had a guide for the first part of the journey from San Francisco to Carson City. From there, I was told the road to Piach was well traveled enough that I could manage on my own." She gave a rueful smile. "That was perhaps optimistic." "That was damn foolish," Warren said, then immediately apologized. "Pardon my language, but a woman alone on these roads is asking for trouble. There are good people in Nevada, but there are also plenty who would not think twice about robbing you or worse." "I know," Eliza said quietly, meeting his eyes. "But I did not have much choice. I could not afford to hire protection all the way to my uncle's ranch, and I could not stay where I was." There it was, the hint of whatever had driven her west. Warren wanted to ask, wanted to know what could push a refined woman from Boston to risk her life traveling alone through wild country. But it was not his place, and he had been raised to respect people's privacy. Instead, he said, "Well, you are safe here tonight, and tomorrow I will give you a proper map showing the way to the Morrison Ranch. It is not a difficult ride if you know where you are going." "Thank you, Mr. Tucker. Your kindness means more than you know." Eliza took another bite of cornbread, then added, "Can I ask, do you run this ranch alone?" "I do now. My father passed 3 years ago, my mother 2 years before that. I have some help during roundup and branding season, hire on a few men from town, but mostly it is just me and about 200 head of cattle." Warren refilled his coffee cup. "It is not a big operation, but it is mine, and it supports me well enough." "It must be lonely," Eliza said, and there was understanding in her voice as though she knew something about loneliness herself. "Sometimes," Warren admitted. "But there is a peace in it too. The land does not judge you, does not expect you to be anything other than what you are." They finished their meal, and Eliza insisted on helping clean up despite Warren's protests. As they washed and dried the dishes, Warren found himself enjoying her company more than he had enjoyed anyone's in a long time. There was something peaceful about her presence, even with all the questions that surrounded her. When the kitchen was clean, Warren showed Eliza to the spare room upstairs. It had been his parents' room once, before his mother got too sick to manage the stairs and they moved downstairs. He had kept it clean but unused, and now he was glad of it. "I hope you will be comfortable," he said, lighting the lamp on the bedside table. "There are extra blankets in the trunk if you get cold. Nights can be chilly this time of year, even though the days are warm." "I am sure it will be perfect. After sleeping on the ground for 2 weeks, a real bed sounds like heaven." Eliza paused in the doorway, looking at him with those sharp green eyes. "Mr. Tucker, I want you to know that I appreciate your trust." Not many men would invite a stranger into their home like this. Not many women would accept, Warren countered. "I suppose we are both taking a chance on each other's character." "I suppose we are," she smiled, a real smile this time that lit up her tired face. "Good night, Mr. Tucker." "Good night, Miss Ashford." Warren returned to the kitchen, too restless for sleep. He poured himself another cup of coffee and sat at the table, pulling out paper and pencil to sketch a map for Eliza. He drew the route from his ranch back to Piach, marking the main landmarks, then the road east to the Morrison Ranch. He included notes about water sources and places to rest the horse, wanting to make sure she arrived safely. As he worked, he could hear the soft sounds of Eliza moving around upstairs, preparing for bed. It felt strange having someone else in the house, but not unpleasant. The loneliness he had admitted to her seemed more acute now, thrown into sharp relief by this temporary companionship. Warren thought about Thomas Morrison, whom he knew slightly from dealings in town. Morrison ran a decent ranch, bigger than Warren's, with his wife and their 2 adult sons. If Eliza was Morrison's niece, she would be in good hands there. The Morrison family was well respected, hard-working people who minded their own business and treated others fairly. But as Warren finished the map, adding careful details to ensure Eliza's safe passage, he found himself wishing that the Morrison ranch was not just a day's ride away. He wished for more time to hear her story, to understand what had brought her here, to simply sit in companionable silence with someone who seemed to understand the value of quiet. He shook his head at his own foolishness. Eliza Ashford was passing through his life for one night, nothing more. Tomorrow she would ride east, and he would return to his work, and in a week he would barely remember what she looked like. That was how these things went. Warren extinguished the kitchen lamp and made his way to his own room downstairs, the map folded carefully on the table for morning. But sleep was slow in coming, and when it finally arrived, his dreams were filled with green eyes and questions he could not ask. Morning came with the sound of roosters crowing, and the gradual lightening of the sky from black to gray to pale blue. Warren rose early as was his habit, dressed, and went out to check on the horses before Eliza woke. The bay gelding looked much better after a night of rest, water, and grain, though Warren still thought another day would do him good. When he returned to the house, he found Eliza already in the kitchen, attempting to work the stove. She jumped when he entered, then laughed at herself. "I am sorry. I was trying to make coffee without waking you, but I cannot quite figure out your stove," she said. "Here, let me show you." Warren demonstrated how to adjust the damper and where to add the wood, and soon they had the fire going properly. As the coffee brewed, Warren sliced bacon and began preparing breakfast. "You do not have to cook for me again," Eliza protested. "You have already done so much. It is no trouble. Besides, you should eat a good breakfast before riding. It will be a long day even with the map." Warren laid the bacon in the pan, enjoying the sizzle and the rich smell that filled the kitchen. They ate together again, falling into the same comfortable rhythm as the night before. Warren showed Eliza the map he had drawn, explaining each landmark and warning her about the tricky parts of the trail. "You have been very thorough," Eliza said, studying the map. "This is wonderful. I cannot thank you enough." "It is nothing," Warren said, but he felt pleased by her appreciation. "Just follow that, take your time, and you should reach your uncle's place by late afternoon." Eliza folded the map carefully and tucked it into her bag. They finished breakfast, and Warren helped her saddle her horse while she gathered her belongings. Too soon, they stood in the yard, the morning sun warm on their faces, ready for her departure. Eliza mounted her horse, settling into the saddle with visible reluctance. She looked down at Warren, and he saw something in her expression that mirrored his own unexpected reluctance to see her go. "Thank you, Mr. Tucker," she said softly, "for the shelter, the food, the map, and for treating me with respect. You are a good man. Safe travels, Miss Ashford. I hope you find what you are looking for at your uncle's ranch." Warren stepped back, holding the horse's bridle for a moment longer than necessary. Eliza nodded, but she did not move. She sat there on her horse, looking down at him, and Warren saw her struggling with something. Finally, she spoke. "Mr. Tucker, can I tell you something? You have been kind to me, and I feel I owe you honesty." "You do not owe me anything," Warren said. "Perhaps not, but I want to tell you anyway." Eliza took a breath. "I am running from a marriage, an arranged marriage to a man in Boston, a business associate of my father's. He is 47 years old, twice widowed, and looking for a young wife to give him sons. My father, who has substantial debts to this man, agreed to the arrangement without consulting me. When I refused, I was told I had no choice, so I left. Warren felt a surge of anger on her behalf. That is why you came to your uncle. Uncle Thomas is my mother's brother. He left Boston years ago because he could not stand the social restrictions and expectations. My mother used to read me his letters, telling me about the freedom of the West. When I was desperate, I remembered those letters. I wrote to him, and he said I could come, that he would stand by me against my father if necessary. Eliza's hands tightened on the reins. So here I am, escaping one life and hoping to build another. Your uncle sounds like a wise man, Warren said, and you are brave to take such a risk. I do not feel brave, I feel terrified most of the time. Eliza smiled sadly, but anything is better than a life without choice. Warren reached up and briefly touched her hand where it rested on the saddle horn. You will be all right. I can see the strength in you. You made it this far, did you not? Eliza turned her hand over, clasping his for just a moment. Her hand was small and soft in his rough, calloused one, and the touch sent an unexpected jolt through him. Goodbye, Mr. Tucker, she said, releasing his hand. Goodbye, Miss Ashford. She turned her horse toward the trail, and Warren watched her ride away, following the path his map laid out. He stood there long after she disappeared from view, feeling the strange emptiness her departure left behind. The day seemed longer than usual. Warren went through his chores mechanically, his mind wandering back to the woman who had knocked on his door asking for directions. He thought about her courage, leaving everything she knew to escape a fate she could not accept. He thought about her smile, the way she moved around his kitchen with quiet grace, the understanding in her eyes when he spoke of loneliness. By evening, Warren found himself looking at the map he had drawn, or rather the copy he had made for himself that morning before Eliza woke. He had told himself it was just to remember the details in case anyone else asked for directions to the Morrison ranch, but that was a lie. He had drawn it because he wanted something, anything, connected to her. This was ridiculous. He was a grown man, not some lovesick boy. Eliza Ashford had stayed one night under his roof, nothing more. She was on her way to start a new life with her family, and he needed to focus on his own work, his own life. But as the days passed, Warren could not stop thinking about her. He wondered if she had reached the Morrison ranch safely, if her uncle had welcomed her warmly, if she was happy there. He found himself inventing reasons to ride into Piotch, hoping he might hear news of the Morrison family, but he never asked directly, too proud to show his interest. 3 weeks after Eliza's visit, Warren was in town buying supplies when he saw Thomas Morrison outside the general store. Morrison was a tall man in his 50s with graying hair and a weathered face that spoke of years working the land. Warren hesitated, then approached. Mr. Morrison. Tucker, good to see you. How is your ranch doing? Morrison shook his hand firmly. Well enough. The cattle are healthy, no major problems. Warren paused, then took the plunge. I heard your niece came to stay with you recently. Morrison's face brightened. Eliza, yes. She arrived about 3 weeks ago. Brave girl, traveling all that way alone. Well, mostly alone. She told us about a rancher who gave her shelter and directions. That was you, was it not? Yes, she got turned around and ended up at my place. Warren tried to keep his voice casual. I hope she arrived safely. She did, thanks in part to that map you drew for her. She still has it actually, keeps it like a treasure. Morrison studied Warren with the shrewd eyes of a man who had lived long enough to see through pretense. You should come by for dinner sometime. My wife loves having guests, and Eliza has mentioned you several times. I think she would like to thank you properly. Warren's heart jumped. I would not want to impose. No imposition. How about Sunday? Come around midday. We usually have a big meal after church. Morrison clapped him on the shoulder. Eliza has been helping my wife with the cooking. I have to say, for a city girl, she is adapting to ranch life surprisingly well. Sunday sounds fine. Thank you for the invitation. Warren managed to keep his voice steady, but inside he felt like a boy promised a special treat. The days until Sunday crawled by with agonizing slowness. Warren found himself paying unusual attention to his appearance, trimming his hair, making sure his good shirt was clean and pressed. He told himself he was just being polite, showing proper respect for the invitation, but he knew it was more than that. When Sunday finally arrived, Warren hitched up his wagon and made the ride to the Morrison Ranch with a mixture of excitement and nervousness he had not felt in years. The Morrison place was larger than his, with a main house, several outbuildings, and extensive corrals. Cattle dotted the surrounding hills, fat and healthy. Thomas Morrison met him in the yard along with his two sons, James and Robert, both in their 20s and built like their father. They welcomed Warren warmly, and Morrison led him toward the house. "Martha," Morrison called as they entered, "our guest is here." Martha Morrison appeared from the kitchen, a plump, cheerful woman with flour on her hands and a warm smile. "Mr. Tucker, welcome. We are so glad you could join us." And then Eliza emerged from the kitchen behind Martha, wearing a simple green dress that matched her eyes, her dark hair neatly arranged. She stopped when she saw Warren, and a smile spread across her face that made his heart skip. "Mr. Tucker," she said, "what a wonderful surprise." "Miss Ashford." Warren removed his hat, suddenly feeling awkward. "You look well. I am glad to see you arrived safely. Thanks to your excellent map and hospitality." Eliza came forward, and Warren noticed she moved with more confidence than she had 3 weeks ago, as though she had already begun to shed the fear that had driven her west. "I have wanted to thank you properly." Dinner was a lively affair, with good food and better conversation. Martha Morrison had indeed prepared a feast: roasted chicken, potatoes, fresh bread, vegetables from her garden, and a pie made from preserved cherries. Warren found himself seated next to Eliza, acutely aware of her presence beside him. The Morrison family welcomed him into their conversation easily, discussing ranch business, news from town, and the ongoing growth of Piach as the silver mines continued to boom. Eliza participated in the conversation with intelligence and humor, and Warren could see that she had found a place here, that the Morrison family genuinely cared for her. After dinner, while Martha and Eliza cleaned up despite Warren's offers to help, Thomas took Warren out to see some new breeding stock he was considering purchasing. James and Robert came along, and the men talked cattle and horses and the challenges of ranching in Nevada. But Warren's attention kept drifting back to the house, to the woman inside who had occupied his thoughts for 3 weeks. "She is something special, is she not?" Thomas said quietly, following Warren's gaze. Warren felt his face heat. "I apologize if I have been rude." "Not at all. I would be more concerned if a young man did not notice a pretty girl." Thomas leaned against the corral fence. "Eliza told us about what she was running from. Damned shame, a father trying to sell his daughter to settle debts. No offense, but back east, people have some twisted ideas about family duty." "No offense taken. I cannot imagine treating a daughter that way." Warren paused. "She seems happy here." "She is. Martha and I never had daughters, just our 2 boys, and having Eliza here has been good for all of us. She is family, and she is welcome to stay as long as she wants." Thomas gave Warren a meaningful look. "Of course, eventually she might want a place of her own, a family of her own. She is young and has a lot of life ahead of her." Warren understood what Thomas was really saying, and he felt a surge of hope mixed with uncertainty. "She has only been here 3 weeks, true, but I have seen how she lights up when she talks about you, and I can see how you look at her." Thomas straightened up. "I am not pushing anything. I am just saying if you were interested in calling on her properly, you would have my blessing and my support." "I barely know her," Warren protested, though his heart was arguing otherwise. "Then get to know her. Come by more often. Stay for dinner, talk to her." Thomas smiled. "Life is short, Tucker. When you find something worth having, you should not let it slip away because you are too cautious." That evening, as the sun began to set, Warren prepared to leave. Eliza walked with him to his wagon, away from the others who had discreetly remained on the porch. "Thank you for coming," she said. "It was good to see you again. Thank you for having me. Your aunt is an excellent cook." Warren climbed up to the wagon seat, then looked down at her. "Would it be all right if I called again? Perhaps next Sunday?" Eliza's smile could have lit up the darkening sky. "I would like that very much." "Then I will see you next Sunday, Miss Ashford." "Eliza," she said. "Please call me Eliza. Only if you call me Warren." "Warren," she repeated, and he loved the way his name sounded in her voice. "Until next Sunday." Warren drove home with his heart lighter than it had been in years. The loneliness of his ranch, which he had accepted as the price of independence, suddenly seemed less like a necessary sacrifice and more like a problem that might have a solution. The next Sunday came, and Warren found himself once again at the Morrison Ranch. This time, after dinner, he and Eliza went for a walk, following a path that led up into the hills behind the ranch house. They talked about everything and nothing, sharing pieces of their lives. Eliza told him about Boston, about a childhood spent in society's strictures, about her love of reading and learning that had been considered unladylike. She spoke of her mother, who had died when Eliza was 16, and how her father had become harder and more distant after that, eventually seeing Eliza as nothing more than a commodity to be traded. Warren told her about his parents, about learning to work the land from his father and to see beauty in harsh places from his mother. He spoke of the loneliness he had admitted to on that first night, the sense that he was living half a life, working and surviving but not truly thriving. "Why did you never marry?" Eliza asked as they stood looking out over the valley, the late afternoon sun painting everything gold. "I suppose I never found anyone who fit," Warren said. "The women in Piotch, they either want a rich miner or they are already spoken for. And I am not good at the social games, the courting rituals. I always felt like I was pretending to be someone I was not." "I know that feeling," Eliza said softly. "In Boston, I was always pretending. Pretending to care about trivial things, pretending to be less intelligent than I was because men found smart women threatening, pretending that I wanted the life that was laid out for me." She turned to look at him. "I do not want to pretend anymore." "Then don't," Warren said. "Be exactly who you are." "Who I am is someone who is deeply grateful to have met you," Eliza said. "Someone who cannot stop thinking about a kind rancher who gave her shelter when she was lost." Warren's breath caught. "I have been thinking about you too, every day since you rode away." They stood there, looking at each other, and Warren saw in Eliza's eyes the same longing he felt. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, he reached out and took her hand. She stepped closer, and then, as naturally as breathing, they were in each other's arms, holding tight as though they had found something precious that they had no intention of letting go. "Is this too fast?" Warren murmured against her hair. "I do not know," Eliza said honestly. "But it feels right, and I have spent my whole life doing what others said I should. For once I want to follow my heart." "Where is your heart leading you?" Warren pulled back just enough to see her face. "To you," Eliza said simply. They walked back to the ranch house hand in hand, and if the Morrison family noticed the change in them, they said nothing. But Thomas caught Warren's eye and gave him a small nod of approval. The weeks that followed established a pattern. Warren came to the Morrison ranch every Sunday, and sometimes Eliza would ride over to his place during the week, bringing food from Martha or just coming to visit. They talked for hours, learning each other's thoughts and dreams. They rode together across the Nevada landscape, and Warren showed Eliza the hidden beauties of the harsh land, the secret waterholes and the valleys where wildflowers bloomed in spring. Eliza proved to be an eager student of ranch life. She learned to handle a horse with skill, to rope cattle with increasing accuracy, to mend tack and cook over an open fire. She transformed from the exhausted, frightened woman who had knocked on Warren's door into someone vibrant and alive, blooming in the freedom of her new life. And Warren, who had thought himself content with solitude, discovered the profound joy of sharing his life with someone who understood him. Eliza did not try to change him or make him into something he was not. She loved the quiet rancher who spoke more with actions than words, who found peace in hard work and simple pleasures. 3 months after that first Sunday dinner, Warren asked Thomas Morrison for permission to marry Eliza. Thomas gave his blessing readily, as did Martha, who had come to love Eliza as the daughter she had never had. But Warren knew the real answer had to come from Eliza herself. He planned carefully, wanting the proposal to be special. On a Sunday afternoon in late September, when the heat of summer had broken and the air had begun to carry the first hints of autumn, Warren took Eliza back to his ranch. They rode out to a place Warren loved, a high meadow with a view of the entire valley. He had packed a picnic, simple but made with care, and they sat on a blanket watching the sun move across the sky. "Eliza," Warren said when the moment felt right, "I need to tell you something." She turned to him with those green eyes that still made his heart race. "What is it?" "When you knocked on my door asking for directions, I never imagined that helping you would change my life. But it did. You changed everything." Warren took her hand. "I was lonely, but I did not know how lonely until you showed me what it felt like to not be alone. I was content, but I did not know the difference between contentment and happiness until you taught me." "Warren," Eliza whispered, tears gathering in her eyes. "I love you," Warren said, the words coming easier than he had expected. "I love your courage, your intelligence, your kindness. I love the way you laugh and the way you look when you are concentrating on learning something new. I love who I am when I am with you." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a ring, a simple gold band with a small emerald that had been his mother's. "I am not a rich man, and ranch life is hard. But I can promise you a life where you will always have choices, where you will always be valued for who you are. Will you marry me, Eliza? Will you stay with me, not just as a traveler passing through, but as my wife, my partner, my love?" Eliza was crying now, but smiling through her tears. "Yes," she said. "Yes, Warren, I will marry you. I love you too. I think I started falling in love with you that first night when you offered shelter without asking for anything in return, when you treated me with respect and kindness. You gave me more than a map and a meal. You gave me hope when I had nearly lost it." Warren slipped the ring onto her finger, and then they were kissing, holding each other as the Nevada sun blessed them with its warmth. When they finally pulled apart, both laughing and crying, Eliza looked at the ring on her hand. "This was your mother's?" she asked. "Yes, my father gave it to her when they married. It is not fancy, but it meant everything to them." Warren touched the ring gently. "I would be honored if you would wear it." "It is perfect," Eliza said. "Everything about this is perfect." They were married 6 weeks later in November of 1872 in a simple ceremony at the small church in Piotch. Thomas Morrison gave Eliza away, Martha cried happy tears, and James and Robert stood up with Warren. The town turned out, curious about the rancher who had been a bachelor so long and the mysterious niece of the Morrisons who had captured his heart. Eliza wore a dress Martha had helped her make, simple but beautiful in ivory silk. Warren wore his best suit and could not stop smiling. When the preacher pronounced them man and wife and Warren kissed his bride, he felt a completeness he had never known before. They had a celebration at the Morrison Ranch, with food and music and dancing. Warren, who normally hated social gatherings, found himself enjoying every minute because Eliza was by his side, her hand in his, her smile lighting up her face. As the sun set and they prepared to leave for Warren's ranch, now their ranch, Eliza threw her arms around Martha. "Thank you for everything, for welcoming me, for loving me, for helping me find my way here. You are our family," Martha said firmly, "and you always will be. Now go, start your new life and be happy." Warren helped Eliza into the wagon and they rode through the gathering darkness toward home. When they arrived, Warren lifted her down from the wagon seat and on impulse swept her up in his arms. "What are you doing?" Eliza laughed. "Carrying my bride over the threshold," Warren said. "It is tradition, is it not?" "I believe it is," Eliza said, wrapping her arms around his neck. Warren carried her into the house, into the home that would now be theirs together. He set her down gently in the kitchen, the same kitchen where she had tried to make coffee that first morning, where they had shared meals and conversation and fallen in love. "Welcome home, Eliza Tucker," Warren said softly. "Home," Eliza repeated, testing the word. "Yes, this is home. Not because of the place, but because you are here." That night, they began their life together in earnest, two people who had found in each other what they had been missing. The months that followed were not without challenges. Ranch life never was, but they faced everything together. Eliza took to being a rancher's wife with the same determination she had shown in escaping Boston. She learned to manage a household on the frontier, to preserve food for winter, to help with the cattle when needed. She also brought her own touches to the ranch house, adding curtains and cushions, planting a garden, turning the functional space into a real home. Warren found that sharing his life made everything better. Work was less tedious when he could discuss it with Eliza over dinner. Problems seemed more manageable when he could talk them through with someone who cared. The loneliness that had been his constant companion disappeared entirely, replaced by a deep contentment. They settled into routines and rhythms, learning each other's habits and preferences. Warren discovered that Eliza loved to read and would often find her curled up with a book in the evening. He began ordering books from catalogs, bringing them home as surprises that made her eyes light up. Eliza learned that Warren was a man of few words but deep feelings, that his quiet presence was as much a declaration of love as any poetry. Winter came, and with it the harsh Nevada cold. But inside their home, there was warmth and light. They spent long evenings by the fire, Warren working on tack or accounts while Eliza read or sewed. Sometimes they talked, sometimes they sat in comfortable silence, but they were always together. In the spring, Eliza realized she was pregnant. She told Warren one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, and the joy on his face was something she would remember for the rest of her life. "A baby," he said, his hand resting gently on her still flat stomach. "Our baby. Are you happy?" Eliza asked, though she could see the answer in his eyes. "Happy does not begin to describe it," Warren said. "Eliza, you have given me everything I never knew I wanted. A home that is more than just a place to sleep, love, and now a child. How could I be anything but overjoyed?" The pregnancy progressed smoothly, though the summer heat was challenging. Martha Morrison came to stay as Eliza's time drew near, and in September of 1873, almost exactly a year after Warren had proposed, Eliza gave birth to a healthy baby boy. They named him Samuel Thomas Tucker, Samuel for Warren's father and Thomas for Eliza's uncle. Warren held his son for the first time with shaking hands, marveling at the tiny perfect fingers and the small face that already showed hints of Eliza's features. "He is beautiful," Warren whispered, terrified of doing anything that might hurt this fragile new life. "He is perfect," Eliza agreed, tired but radiant. "Just like his father." Being parents transformed them again, adding new dimensions to their love. Warren discovered a tenderness in himself he had not known existed, sitting up nights with a crying baby, changing diapers without complaint, singing softly to soothe his son. Eliza found strength she had not known she possessed, managing the demands of an infant while still helping run the ranch. Samuel grew into a bright, curious toddler, following Warren around the ranch and getting into everything. By the time he was 2, Eliza was pregnant again, and in early 1876, they welcomed a daughter they named Catherine Martha Tucker, after Eliza's mother and Martha Morrison. The ranch prospered as well. Warren's hard work and careful management paid off, and they were able to expand, buying more land and increasing their herd. They hired on permanent help, a young man named Jack who had arrived in Nevada looking for work and proved to be reliable and hardworking. Life was not always easy. There were dry years when they worried about water for the cattle. There were harsh winters when they lost animals to cold and wolves. There were times when Eliza missed certain comforts of her old life, and times when Warren felt the weight of responsibility heavy on his shoulders. But through it all, they had each other. When Eliza felt homesick for a life she could barely remember, Warren held her and reminded her of all the reasons she had left. When Warren worried about providing for his growing family, Eliza reminded him of everything they had already accomplished together. The Morrison family remained close, with frequent visits back and forth. Samuel and Catherine grew up knowing their great-uncle Thomas and Aunt Martha, learning from them and being spoiled by them. Thomas, who had supported Eliza when she needed it most, took great pride in seeing her happy and settled. In the summer of 1878, a letter arrived from Boston. Eliza's father, writing for the first time since she had left, informed her that he was ill and asking to see her. Eliza read the letter with complicated emotions, old wounds reopening even as she recognized the genuine plea in her father's words. "What do you want to do?" Warren asked, holding her as she cried. "I do not know," Eliza admitted. "Part of me wants to tell him that he lost the right to ask anything of me when he tried to sell me. But part of me remembers when he was different, when he was a good father, before my mother died." "Then maybe that is the part you should listen to," Warren said gently. "Not for his sake, but for yours, so you do not carry regret." They talked long into the night, weighing options. Finally, they decided that Eliza would write to her father, offering a tentative reconciliation but making clear that her life was in Nevada now, with her husband and children. She would not return to Boston, but if her father was truly sorry and willing to accept her choices, they could rebuild some form of relationship. Her father's response came months later. He was dying, he admitted, and he had come to regret many of his choices. He asked for forgiveness and expressed a wish to meet his grandchildren, even if only through photographs. Eliza sent pictures of Samuel and Catherine and letters describing her life. When her father died the following spring, she grieved for what had been lost, but felt peace knowing that they had reconciled, at least partially, before the end. The years continued to pass, marked by the rhythms of ranch life and the growth of their family. Samuel grew into a strong, capable boy who loved the ranch and the land as much as his father did. Catherine was bright and curious, always asking questions and wanting to know how things worked. In 1881, Eliza gave birth to twins, two girls they named Grace and Anna. The ranch house, which had once seemed too large for one man, now rang with the sounds of children laughing and playing. Warren expanded the house, adding rooms to accommodate their growing family. He sometimes thought back to that day when a tired woman had knocked on his door asking for directions, how his life had changed from that single moment of kindness. He had given Eliza a map, a meal, and shelter for a night. In return, she had given him everything: love, family, purpose, and joy. Eliza often thought about how close she had come to a different life, trapped in a loveless marriage in Boston, her spirit slowly crushed by expectations and obligations. She had taken a desperate chance, fleeing west to an uncle she barely knew, and that chance had led her to Warren. Sometimes at night, lying beside her husband with their children asleep down the hall, she would marvel at how a wrong turn on a Nevada trail had actually been the rightest turn of her life. As their children grew, Warren and Eliza made sure to teach them the values they held dear: hard work, honesty, kindness to those in need, and the importance of making their own choices. They told Samuel, Catherine, Grace, and Anna about how they had met, about the night Eliza had knocked on the door asking for directions. "Your mother was the bravest person I had ever met," Warren would say. "She had traveled so far, risked so much, to find freedom and choice. And your father was the kindest," Eliza would add. "He helped a stranger without asking for anything in return. He gave me a map to where I thought I wanted to go, but what he really gave me was a reason to stop traveling and start living." The children loved the story, asking to hear it again and again. They would look at the map Warren had drawn, which Eliza had framed and hung in their bedroom, a reminder of where they had started. Thomas Morrison passed away in 1885, having lived to see Eliza happy and settled with a family of her own. Martha followed him 2 years later, and Eliza grieved deeply for the aunt and uncle who had given her a chance when she needed it most. But she also felt grateful that they had known her children, that they had seen the good life she and Warren had built. The ranch continued to prosper. Samuel, as he grew older, showed a real aptitude for working with horses and took over much of that side of the operation. Catherine surprised everyone by showing an interest in the business side of ranching, keeping meticulous records and helping Warren make decisions about when to buy and sell. The twins, Grace and Anna, were inseparable and shared a love of the land itself. They would disappear for hours, exploring the hills and valleys, returning with stories of what they had seen. Eliza, remembering her own love of learning that had been stifled in Boston, encouraged all their children to pursue their interests, whatever they might be. By the 1890s, the wild frontier of Nevada was beginning to change. The railroad had come, bringing more settlers and more civilization. Piach itself had grown from a rough mining town into a more established community with schools and churches and regular law enforcement. But the Tucker Ranch remained much as it had always been, a place of hard work and simple pleasures, of family and love. Warren, now in his 40s, had gray in his hair but was still strong and capable. Eliza, in her late 30s, was as beautiful as ever to Warren's eyes, her face showing the character that came from a life well lived. They would sometimes sit on their porch in the evening, watching the sun set over the same landscape where they had first spoken of love, and reflect on the journey that had brought them there. "You ever regret it?" Warren asked one evening. "Leaving everything behind, coming west?" "Not for a single moment," Eliza said firmly. I left behind a life that would have killed my spirit. Here I found freedom, purpose, and love. How could I regret that? I am glad you got lost that day, Warren said, taking her hand. Glad you knocked on my door instead of someone else's. I do not think I was lost, Eliza said thoughtfully. I think I was exactly where I was supposed to be. Sometimes the wrong direction leads you to the right place. As their children grew into adults and began making their own paths, Warren and Eliza remained the center of a growing family. Samuel married a rancher's daughter from the next county over, and they built a house on the Tucker land, expanding the ranch operation. Catherine, surprising everyone, went to San Francisco to study business, though she returned regularly and never lost her love for the ranch. Grace and Anna eventually married brothers from a neighboring ranch, and the combined properties became one of the largest operations in the region. All of the Tucker children remained close, bound by the strong foundation their parents had given them. Warren and Eliza became grandparents, delighting in the next generation. They taught their grandchildren the same lessons they had taught their children, about kindness, courage, and the importance of choosing your own path. In 1898, on their 26th wedding anniversary, Warren and Eliza renewed their vows in the same church where they had married. Their children and grandchildren surrounded them, along with friends from throughout the region. The ceremony was simple but deeply meaningful, a reaffirmation of the love that had sustained them through more than a quarter century. I would choose you again, Warren said, holding Eliza's hands. Every day in every life I would choose you. And I would choose you, Eliza replied, tears streaming down her face. The man who gave a lost traveler directions and so much more. You gave me a home, a family, and a love beyond measure. The new century arrived, bringing changes but also continuity. The Tucker Ranch adapted to new technologies and methods while maintaining the core values that Warren and Eliza had established. Their children and grandchildren continued the work they had started, building on the foundation of love and hard work. Warren and Eliza grew old together, their hair turning white, their steps slowing, but their love never diminishing. They spent their later years surrounded by family, watching new generations grow up on the land they had built together. On summer evenings, they would sit on their porch, holding hands as they had done for decades, and talk about their life. They remembered the night they met, the months of courtship, the wedding, the birth of each child, the challenges they had faced and overcome together. It has been a good life, Warren said one evening as the sun painted the sky in shades of pink and gold. The best life, Eliza agreed. Better than I ever imagined possible when I was that frightened girl fleeing Boston. You were never just a frightened girl, Warren said. You were brave and strong, even when you did not know it. I found my strength with you, Eliza said. You gave me a safe place to become who I was meant to be. Warren Tucker passed away peacefully in his sleep in the spring of 1910 at the age of 64. He was surrounded by his family, with Eliza holding his hand as he drew his last breath. His funeral drew people from across the region, all coming to pay respects to a man known for his integrity, kindness, and devotion to his family. Eliza grieved deeply, but also felt grateful for the 38 years they had shared. She remained on the ranch, cared for by her children and grandchildren, still the heart of the family Warren had helped her build. She lived another 7 years, passing away in 1917 at the age of 66. Her last words were Warren's name, and her children took comfort in believing that she was going to join the man she had loved for nearly half a century. They buried Eliza next to Warren on a hill overlooking the ranch, the same hill where he had proposed all those years ago. The stone marker bore both their names and a simple inscription chosen by their children. She asked for directions. He gave her a home. Together they built a legacy of love. The Tucker Ranch continued for generations, passed down through the family, each generation adding their own chapter to the story, while honoring the foundation Warren and Eliza had laid. The grandchildren told their children about the great-grandparents who had met by chance, fallen in love, and built something lasting. The map Warren had drawn that first morning, showing Eliza the way to the Morrison Ranch, remained a family treasure. It hung in the main house, a reminder of how a simple act of kindness can change everything. The map showed one path, but the journey it had started led somewhere neither Warren nor Eliza had anticipated. To each other, to a love that transcended time and circumstance, to a family that would carry their legacy forward. In the end, the story of Warren Tucker and Eliza Ashford was a testament to the power of choice, courage, and love. Eliza had chosen to flee an intolerable situation, to risk everything for freedom. Warren had chosen to help a stranger, to open his heart to love. Together, they had chosen each other, day after day, year after year, building a life that honored both of them. The Nevada landscape that had witnessed their first meeting remained largely unchanged, still harsh and beautiful, still demanding strength from those who called it home. But the Tucker Ranch stood as proof that even in the hardest places, love could flourish. That sometimes getting lost was the first step to being found. That a map, a meal, and a night's shelter could be the beginning of forever. Years turned into decades, and decades into a century, but the story lived on. Great-great-grandchildren who never knew Warren and Eliza still heard the tale of how their family began. They learned about the woman who knocked on a door asking for directions, and the man who gave her so much more. They learned about courage and kindness, about taking chances and following your heart. And on quiet evenings, when the Nevada sun set over the Tucker Ranch in the same spectacular fashion it had for over 100 years, you could almost feel the presence of Warren and Eliza, the love they had shared still echoing through the land they had called home. Their story, born from a chance meeting on a dusty trail in 1872, had become timeless, a reminder that the most profound journeys often begin with a single knock on a door, a moment of kindness, and the courage to stop running and start living. The legacy they left was not just land or cattle or material wealth, though their descendants benefited from all of those. The real legacy was the understanding that home is not a place, but the people you choose and who choose you. That love requires both bravery and kindness. That sometimes the best direction is the one that leads you away from where you thought you were going and toward where you were meant to be all along. In the archives of Lincoln County, Nevada, there are records of Warren Tucker and Eliza Ashford Tucker, documenting their marriage, the births of their children, their business dealings, and their deaths. But the official records cannot capture the truth of their story. The love that transformed two lonely people into partners, the courage that brought them together, and the joy they found in building a life side by side. That truth lives on in the stories told by their descendants, in the ranch that still bears their name, and in the lesson their lives taught. That kindness is never wasted, that love is worth risking everything for, and that sometimes the greatest adventure begins when you stop traveling and finally come home. The Wild West was a place of harsh realities and tough choices, where survival often trumped sentiment and practicality ruled over romance. But in the midst of all that hardship, Warren Tucker and Eliza Ashford found something rare and precious. They found each other, and in doing so, they proved that even in the wildest places, love could not only survive but thrive. Their story, simple in its beginning but profound in its impact, stood as a testament to the human capacity for connection, for building something beautiful even in difficult circumstances. It reminded generations that followed that the most important journeys are not the ones measured in miles, but the ones measured in moments and choices, in the courage to open your door and your heart to possibility. And so the story of She Knocked asking directions, he gave her a map, a meal, and a reason to stop traveling became more than just a family legend. It became a truth, a reality, a love story for the ages, set against the backdrop of the American West but universal in its message, that we are all travelers seeking home, and sometimes home finds us in the most unexpected ways, through the most unexpected people, when we are brave enough to knock on an unfamiliar door and wise enough to recognize the gift when it is offered.